This was how she thought not only of Nika and Pasha but of the whole fighting city. Good, decent boys, she thought. It's because they are good that they are shooting. 19. They learned that the barricade might be shelled and that their house would be in danger. It was too late to think of going to stay with friends in some other part of Moscow, the quarter was surrounded. They had to find shelter in the neighborhood, within the ring. They thought of the Montenegro. It turned out that they were not the first to think of it. The hotel was full. There were many others who shared their predicament. For old time's sake the proprietor promised to put them up in the linen room. Not to attract attention by carrying suitcases, they packed the most necessary things into 3 bundles. Then they put off moving from day to day. Because the employees of the workshop were treated rather like family members, they had continued to work despite the strike. But one dull, cold afternoon there was a ring at the door. Someone had come to complain and to argue. The owner was asked for. Fedosova went instead to pour oil on the troubled waters. A few moments later she called the seamstresses into the hall and introduced them to the visitor. He shook hands all round, clumsily and with emotion, and went away having apparently reached an agreement with Fedosova. The seamstresses came back into the workroom and began tying on their shawls and putting on their shabby winter coats. "What has happened?" asked Madame Gishar, hurrying in. "They're calling us out, madam, we're on strike." "But, have I ever wronged you?" Madame Gishar burst into tears. "Don't be upset, Amalia Karlovna. We've got nothing against you. We're very grateful to you. It's not just you and us. Everybody's doing the same, the whole world. You can't go against everybody, can you?" They all went away, even Olyadimna and Fedosova, who whispered to Madame Gishar in parting that she agreed to the strike for the good of the owner and the establishment. But Amalia Karlovna was inconsolable. "What black ingratitude! To think that I was so mistaken in these people. The kindness I've lavished on that brat. Well, admittedly she's only a child, but that old witch. They can't make an exception just for you, mother, don't you see?" Lara said soothingly. "No one bears you any malice. On the contrary. All that's being done now is done in the name of humanity, in defense of the weak, for the good of women and children." "Yes, it is. Don't shake your head so skeptically. You'll see, one day you and I will be better off because of it." But her mother could not understand. "It's always like this," she sobbed. "Just when I can't think straight you come out with something that simply astounds me. People play a dirty trick on me, and you say it's all for my good. No, really, I must be out of my mind." Rodia was at school. Lara and her mother wandered about aimlessly, alone in the empty house. The unlit street stared emptily into the rooms, and the rooms returned its stare. "Let's go to the hotel, mother, before it gets dark," Lara begged. "Do come, mother. Don't put it off, let's go now." Filat, they called the janitor. "Take us to the Montenegro, be a good boy." "Very good, madam. Take the bundles over. And keep an eye on the house, Filat, until things sort themselves out. And please don't forget the bird seed for Kirill Modestovich, and to change his water. And keep everything locked up. That's all, I think, and please keep in touch with us." "Very well, madam." "Thank you, Filat. God keep you. Well, let's sit down and then we must be off." When they went out the fresh air seemed as unfamiliar as after weeks of illness. Noises, rounded, as if turned on a lathe, rolled echoing lightly through the crisp, frosty, nut-clean space. Shots and salvos smacked, thudded, and plopped, flattening the distances into a pancake. However much Filat tried to convince them to the contrary, Lara and Amalia Karlovna insisted that the shots were blanks. "Don't be silly, Filat. Think it out for yourself. How could they be anything but blanks when you can't see anyone shooting? Who do you think is shooting, the Holy Ghost or what? Of course they're blanks. At one of the crossroads they were stopped by a patrol of grinning Cossacks who searched them, insolently running their hands over them from head to foot. Their visorless caps with chin straps were tilted jauntily over one ear. It made all of them look one-eyed. Wonderful, thought Lara as she walked on. She would not see Komarovsky for as long as the district was cut off from the rest of the town. Because of her mother it was impossible for her to break with him. She could not say, "Mother, please stop seeing him." If she did that, it would all come out. And what if it did? Why should that frighten her? Oh, God. Anything, if only it would end. God. God. She would fall down in a faint with disgust. What was it she had just remembered? What was the name of that frightful picture? There was a fat Roman in it. It hung in the first of those private rooms, the one where it all began. The woman or the vase, yes, that was it. Of course. It was a famous picture. The woman or the vase. When she first saw it she was not yet a woman, she was not yet comparable to an expensive work of art. That came later. The table was splendidly set for a feast. "Where do you think you are running like that? I can't keep up with you," panted Madame Guichard. Lara walked swiftly, some unknown force swept her on as though she were striding on air, carried along by this proud, quickening strength. How splendid, she thought, listening to the gunshots. Blessed are the downtrodden. Blessed are the deceived. God speed you, bullets. You and I are of one mind. 20. The brothers Gromeko had a house at the corner of Sivsave-Brazhuk and another small street. Alexander Alexandrovich and Nikolai Alexandrovich Gromeko were professors of chemistry, the one at the Peters Academy, the other at the university. Nikolai was unmarried. Alexander had a wife, Anna Ivanovna, Annie E. Kruger. Her father was an ironmaster. He owned an enormous estate in the Urals, near Yurii, on which there were several abandoned, unprofitable mines. The Gromekos' house had 2 stories. On the top floor were the bedrooms, the schoolroom, Alexander Alexandrovich's study and his library, Anna Ivanovna's boudoir, Antonia's and Yura's rooms. The ground floor was used for receptions. Its pistachio-colored curtains, gleaming piano top, aquarium, olive green upholstery, and potted plants resembling seaweed made it look like a green, sleepily swaying seabed. The Gromekos were cultivated, hospitable, and great connoisseurs and lovers of music. They often held receptions and evenings of chamber music at which piano trios, violin sonatas, and string quartets were performed. Such a musical evening was to be held in January, 1906. There was to be a first performance of a violin sonata by a young composer, a pupil of Tania Ev's, and a trio by Tchaikovsky. The preparations were begun the day before. The furniture was moved around in the ballroom. In one corner the piano tuner struck the same chord dozens of times and scattered arpeggios like handfuls of beads. In the kitchen, chickens were being plucked, vegetables cleaned, and mustard mixed with olive oil for sauces and salad dressings. Shura Schlesinger, Anna's bosom friend and confidant, had come first thing in the morning, making a nuisance of herself. She was a tall thin woman with regular features and a rather masculine face which recalled the emperor's, especially when she wore her grey astrakhan hat set at an angle. She kept it on in the house, only slightly raising the veil pinned to it. In times of sorrow or anxiety the 2 friends lightened each other's burdens. They did this by saying unpleasant things to each other, their conversation becoming increasingly caustic until an emotional storm burst and soon ended in tears and a reconciliation. These periodic quarrels had a tranquilizing effect on both, like the application of leeches for high blood pressure. Shura Schlesinger had been married several times. but she forgot her husbands as soon as she divorced them, and despite her many marriages there was a certain coldness, like that of a spinster, about her. She was a theosophist. But she was also an expert on the ritual of the Orthodox Church, and even when she was tout transport in a state of utter ecstasy, could not refrain from prompting the officiating clergy. Hear, O Lord, now and ever shall be. Glorious cherubim, she muttered ceaselessly in her hoarse, staccato patter. Shura Schlesinger knew mathematics, esoteric Indian doctrine, the addresses of the best-known teachers at the Moscow Conservatory, who was living with whom, and God only knows what else. For this reason she was called in, as arbiter and organizer, on all important occasions in life. At the appointed time the guests began to arrive. There came Adelaida Filipovna, Jins, the Fufkovs, M.R. and M.R.S. Basserman, the Verzhitskys, Colonel Kavkazsafe. It was snowing, and whenever the front door was opened you could see the swirling air rush past, as though tangled in 1,000 knots by the flickering snow. The men came in out of the cold in high clumsy snow boots, and every one of them, without exception, did his best to look like a country bumpkin. But their wives, on the contrary, their faces glowing from the frost, coats unbuttoned, shawls pushed back and hair spangled with rime, looked like hardened coquettes, cunning itself. Cooey's nephew, the whisper went round as the new pianist came in. Beyond the open side doors of the ballroom the supper table gleamed, white and long as a winter road. The play of light on frosted bottles of red rowan berry cordial caught the eye. The crystal cruets on silver stands and the picturesque arrangement of game and zakuski captured the imagination. The napkins folded into stiff pyramids and the baskets of mauve cineraria, smelling of almonds, seemed to whet the appetite. Not to delay the pleasure of earthly food too long, the company got down hastily to their spiritual repast. They sat down in rows. Cooey's nephew, they whispered again as the musician took his place at the piano. The concert began. The sonata was known to be dry, labored, and boring. The performance confirmed this belief, and the work turned out to be terribly long as well. During the interval the critic Kerimbekov and Alexander Gromeko had an argument about it, Kerimbekov running it down and Gromeko defending it. All around them people smoked, talked, and moved their chairs, till the glittering tablecloth in the adjoining room once again attracted attention. All proposed that the concert be resumed without delay. The pianist cast a sideways glance at the audience, and signaled his partners to begin. The violinist and tyshkevich flourished their bows. The music rose plaintively. Yurii, Tonia, and Miss Gordon, who spent half his time at the Gromekos, were sitting in the third row. Igorovna is making signs at you, Yurii whispered to Alexander Alexandrovich, who sat directly in front of him. Igorovna, the Gromeko's white-haired old servant, stood in the doorway and by staring desperately at Yurii and nodding with equal energy at Alexander Alexandrovich tried to make Yurii understand that she needed urgently to speak to the master. Alexander Alexandrovich turned, gave her a reproachful look, and shrugged his shoulders, but she stood her ground. Soon they were talking across the room by signs, like a couple of deaf mutes. People were looking. Anna Ivanovna cast devastating glances at her husband. He got up. Something had to be done. Blushing, he tiptoed around the edge of the room. "How can you do such a thing, Igorovna? Really now, what's all the fuss?" "Well, hurry up, what is it?" Igorovna whispered in his ear. "What Montenegro?" "The hotel." "Well, what about it?"